New York's often not associated with rural, but the reality is there is a lot of rural and there's a lot of underserved communities there. Peter Rasmusson, FARR Technologies, why don't you tell us about some of the things you're seeing happening in the Empire State?
Very good, thanks, Ken. We've got a number of opportunities going in upstate New York. The governor, in his State of the State message this January, announced a $500 million program to expand broadband into upstate New York, primarily targeted at areas that are defined as unserved, which would be less than about 6 megs down. Also looking at targeting areas that are underserved, which is kind of a floating definition. But he's got a pretty ambitious goal. He'd like to get 100 megabit service out to areas where it makes sense. Obviously, that's probably a fiber kind of a build. And in those areas that are more rural, more rugged, because there is a lot of that kind of territory in upstate New York, especially looking at something probably shooting for more like a 25 megabit. You got a lot of areas of upstate New York that have had, to put it kindly, underinvestment for decades. A lot of customers in those areas of New York State have dial-up access. Some of them might have some slow DSL. In the smaller communities, you might have a little bit of cable TV broadband. And other than that, your only other choice is satellite. So you have a lot of people who have either very expensive, relatively slow, or basically no broadband access at all, and it covers a lot of geography of the state. They're really looking to bring this broadband out for a number of different uses, one being those people who want to work from home, second being for their school systems. They've got a lot of money that's gone in to upgrade the connections and the speeds at the schools, but they're trying to use the e-books and some of the other electronic learning tools to expand that into the students' home so that they can get a richer, more full experience of their school environment. But obviously with dial-up or slow DSL, it's just not going to happen because the speeds aren't there to support it.
So these are one-time grants then?
Yes, there are one-time grants. They'll space them out over a 4-year period is the current. They'll start relatively slowly in this current year, assuming that they can politically agree and get their budgets passed and everything, and then really ramping up in 2016, 2017, and then whatever's left during 2018 timeframe. So it's a pretty fast rollout. They're looking, like I said, to get some of the grants awarded here in 2015 yet to, and obviously New York's got construction seasons kind of like the upper Midwest does, so we'll see how much actually gets built during this year, but they're looking to get it rolling this year.
I would imagine that means probably a lot of fiber. If they're one-time grants, people are going to want to install things that they don't have to come back and upgrade and maintain.
Well, that's exactly right. I think a lot of the upstate communities see this as their chance to basically leapfrog and catch up with what's been going on in New York City or Rochester or Buffalo or Albany, and get to a point where they are now with the state-of-the-art network so that they have 30, 40 years of network that will provide them with the kind of services that they need in order to be competitive well into the future.
I would imagine also, if you're an independent ILEC, you've probably done a pretty good job of getting broadband out already, but the challenge is probably in those areas outside their existing exchange. So is this available for those operators to take and go outside their exchanges?
Yes, you can, so long as the area that you're planning to serve falls into whatever the definition ultimately turns out to be. But certainly an unserved area, no problem. So if you're in an area where you're only doing 6 meg down or less, that's considered to be unserved in the state. So all those areas will be eligible, and who actually applies for the areas is a matter of choice. It could be a local ILEC, and there are a number of them looking to do that. Could be a local cable television company. Time Warner has received several grants through previous cycles of other funds. So, but it wouldn't preclude an ILEC in some other part of the country that's looking to diversify geographically and wants to get in on the game. So they're pretty much open to anybody who can show that they know what they're doing and write a good grant.
So is it also competitive bidding if you have 2 or 3 entities going for the same spot? How do they decide who?
Their rules are under development as we speak, so we don't know all the particulars, but certainly one of the big drivers will be the governor is positioning this such that he'd like to see a one-to-one match. So if he gives you $10 million, he'd like to see you bringing in $10 million of other non-state funding, whether that would be cash or equity from the company putting out the bid, whether it would be from federal sources or other private sources. Doesn't matter really what the match is, just so long as it's non-state of New York funding. And so with that, obviously their dollars go further if you come in and request less of a match, whether it be you request $1 for $1 match as opposed to the next guy who says I need $1.50 for every dollar. So that will be part of the criteria. Just don't know all the details at this point.
I'd imagine too, and that's probably where you guys could come in. Creative ways of having a match, like maybe it's a fiber swap or lease or something like that. Right?
Yeah, all that the devil will be in those details when we know what the rules are. But certainly those are all opportunities, as well as if there are companies that can do their own construction, that could be certainly part of the match there too. So,
and I would imagine this is important from a national standpoint because this is it seems like a very innovative program.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of states that have taken this step to try and boost the broadband in their own state. I mean, here in Minnesota, they've obviously had a program both at the state and they've got a private foundation that has done some broadband expansion here. As we talked a little earlier, California has got a advanced services fund. But by and large, those state efforts tend to be more the exception rather than the rule. So if there are other states that are looking around for a model, New York State could very much be kind of the model that other states could look at to replicate for their own individual locality.
Yeah, and this is a significant amount of money too, right?
It's as the governor likes to say, it's $1 billion program. Half of it, half the billion comes from him, and the other half comes from somebody else. But yeah, it's a very substantial program. But like I referenced earlier, there are a lot of areas of New York State that are in desperate need of getting fiber or advanced wireless to help them out and boost the broadband capabilities outside of the major cities. So
excellent. Well, Peter, I appreciate your time and enlightening us.
Thanks, Ken.
On this. Thanks.